Yes, we were a Filipino-American contingent, basically three groups, Bayan USA, whose member organizations here in New York are Filipinos for Rights and Empowerment, Anak Bayan, New York, New Jersey, and the New York Committee for Human Rights in the Philippines, NAFCON, or the National Alliance for Filipino Concerns, and Katarungan, which is Center for Peace, Justice, and Human Rights in the Philippines, which is based in Washington, D.C. We staged an action in front of the Philippine Embassy, which is near DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C., and our message was really to celebrate the official end of the Bush administration, which for 8 long years, in tandem with the Arroyo administration in the Philippines, has really terrorized a lot of Filipinos worldwide, including most especially Filipinos in the Philippines, because of the global war on terror. And President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo is actually the biggest enforcer, or the strongest enforcer, of the Bush policies in the Asia-Pacific region today.
And talk a little bit about that alliance, the Arroyo and Bush relationship with the war on terror. What role has she played when you say she's the biggest advocate of that? What is that? How does that play out in the Philippines?
I would say that the two have a lot in common. They are both children of ex-presidents. They're also both illegitimate presidents in the sense that the elections in which they won carry an air of suspicion because of alleged fraudulent schemes. Back in 2000, when the Bush administration won its first term, shortly afterwards, the September 11th disaster happened. And in 2001, President Arroyo of the Philippines, who was also recently elected she was not elected, she was ascended into power in 2001 after the ouster of her predecessor, Joseph Estrada. She was the first in Asia to openly support the global war on terror as a retaliation to the September 11th attacks, and also to open up the Philippines because of, at the time, there was a very significant development in Mindanao with this kidnap for ransom terrorist group by the name of Abu Sayyaf that had kidnapped a number of American tourists and killed them. And as a pretext for this, Arroyo opened up the Philippines for U.S. troops to launch counterterrorism exercises under the auspices of the global war on terror. So the Philippines, as Bush said in his State of the Nation address, is the so-called second front to the war on terror. And the Arroyo administration is the biggest partner in this scheme.
And that relates to her efforts to make changes to the federal constitution in the Philippines. What usually gets the most attention is that it could extend her term in office rather than the one term for 6 years. And people are worried about that, about term limits and a changing of power. But there are some other aspects to the change of constitution as well that would have big effects. What are those?
Absolutely. Just to start off, we call the issue in the Philippines is popularly referred to as Cha-Cha, which is short for charter change. The charter here that we're talking about is the Philippine Constitution of 1987. In 1987, after the downfall of the former Marcos dictatorship, there were provisions amended into the Constitution that would allow for martial law to never be implemented again, and also for elements of sovereignty or the semblance of national sovereignty in the Philippines, such as the prohibition of foreign troops being able to set up permanent bases in the Philippines, which we had before with the U.S. bases, and also for restrictions on foreign ownership of Philippine natural assets and natural resources and Philippine territory. What essentially the Cha-Cha that Arroyo wants to push right now would basically liberalize all of that. And yes, it is true that I think her direct interest, or her administration's most immediate interest right now, is to maintain its power through term extension. But the bottom line of the Cha-Cha right now is really intensified U.S. intervention in the Philippines. I mean, that's really the bottom line. And I think the U.S. government's historical interest in the Philippines has always been to plunder and invest in its natural resources, and to also reap cheap labor, a cheap labor force that it can exploit here in the United States. Where Arroyo and the U.S. government intersect, I guess, interests intersect, is in the Chacha, because these provisions basically satisfy all of those interests. So the historical roots of the Chacha really do lie in the U.S. intervention in Mindanao. Basically, they exploited an ongoing struggle between the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, which is an armed group right now in Mindanao that is fighting for self-determination of the Bangsamoro people, which is a national minority in the Philippines right now. And basically, the MILF has been undergoing a very long peace process with the government of the Republic of the Philippines, or the GRP. Basically, because of U.S. encouragement in the peace process, or U.S. intervention in the peace process, they engineered this whole maneuver wherein they would draft a memorandum of agreement on ancestral domain and allow for the GRP to, or they encouraged the GRP peace negotiators to go ahead and sign this memorandum of agreement that they drafted, saying that they would allow the Bangsamoro people to actually enjoy self-determination of their own ancestral domain. But basically, this is unconstitutional per the Philippine Constitution, and the Supreme Court rejected it, and it basically launched this intensified armed conflict in Mindanao, and the whole presentation of this conflict is that it's a Muslim-Christian conflict. It's not a moral-Christian conflict. It's not a religious conflict at all. It's basically the conflict between the people of Mindanao, which includes Muslims, indigenous, and Christians, against intensified foreign intervention. And
let me see. And this latest development where the Supreme Court overruled that was last August. Is that right? Or
yes,
08 or. I mean, this is last year we're talking about,
yes,
right?
Yes, this was last year, correct.
Okay. And so bringing that up to speed now, I mean, where do things stand now? How is that conflict?
Well, they realized quickly that in order to implement this memorandum of agreement on ancestral domain, they would have to change the Philippine Constitution, because that's basically what's in their way. And this was totally masterminded by the U.S. government. I have to clarify that, wherein they wanted to change the Philippine Constitution because the Philippine Constitution of 1987 carries very strong restrictions on economic liberalization. Basically, the bottom line for these changes are to basically lift any semblance of Philippine national sovereignty in the main charter, so that foreign entities and multinational corporations such as the United States corporations and the United States government can basically invade the Philippines and plunder all of its natural resources, and bring more troops in as a strategic global area for its permanent military bases once again.
So if you say this